We are starting a new project this evening. I'm going to be reading chapter 1 of a book that Natalia Skala has written about the history of her family, and it's titled Be Mine. Chapter 1. It was a gloriously brilliant night as Andrey's eyes swept across the star-bejeweled heavens, and he pondered the crisp contrast of the past 2 days. The edges of his former world and this world were as clear-cut as a granite cliff. There were no murky marshes masking the shoreline. He knew precisely when he had passed from one reality to the next. It was as obvious as the abrupt sound he would soon hear when the rumbling earth beneath this horse-drawn carriage would give way to the pounding clamor of a stone lane, to the opulent palace. He couldn't shake loose from the fear that had gripped his heart as he pictured himself in a vast ballroom filled with orchestral waltzes, surrounded by elegantly attired nobility, swarming about the polished marble floor like a school of fish dancing in the sea. Andrey was bedecked in the unfamiliar finery of silk shirt, cummerbund, tie, and heeled leather boots, borrowed from his close friend, Peter Petrovich Vorontsov. In fact, Peter's family had provided a closet filled with clothes for all occasions in the luxurious suite that Andrey was to occupy in the Vorontsov castle this summer. Andrey had willingly hung up his coarse black wool attire upon arrival. He and Peter had just completed their formal education at a renowned seminary in Poland. Peter's family had insisted that Peter attend the finest scholarly training institution. His father was a decorated general, and his mother was a baroness, so money was no barrier for their family. Andrey, on the other hand, had no family tie, but by the mercy of God, he had been granted a 7-year seminary education. He and Peter were serious students, in contrast to many of the rich young men who came to the seminary only to please their parents and to spend boundless fortunes finding themselves in a frenzy of worldly passion. Quest for knowledge was the passion that Peter and Andrey shared in this serious pursuit. They had quickly cemented their friendship fast through this rigorous training, and immediately following graduation, Peter had invited Andrey to come to his home in the Ukraine to spend the summer. Andrey shook his head as he contemplated the twist of fate which had led him to the ball this night. Just last week he had taken the priestly vows of ordination and eagerly accepted his first assignment to serve in an Orthodox small village in the Karamsuvu region of Russia. His chosen duty was the polar opposite from a rich bounty which he would experience with Peter on holidays this summer in Nikolaevsk territory of Ukraine. He welcomed the opportunity to spend leisurely months with Peter, especially to engage in hours of uninterrupted philosophical and religious conversation. But Andrey had not anticipated the pressure and obligation to participate in the opulence of Peter's family life as a guest. He would have to maintain a posture of gratefulness and rely on Peter's better judgment and experience. Andrey determined to stay as close to Peter's side as possible as he carried out his gracious social responsibilities given to his popular reputation as a priest. Andrey anticipated a long, awkward evening, but perhaps after introduction and a period of refreshment, he could find solitude in a quiet respite under the starlit sky. Being a deeply pious and religious person, Andrey had no desire to spend his evening in the company of this upper echelon who lived in a world far different from his pursuit of quietness, scriptures, and prayer. His solemnness had branded him as a melancholic by his fellow students, but his serious nature was filled with hope and thankfulness. He easily overlooked the taunting of others because he was solidly rooted in his desire to learn more of the Almighty One who clearly had protected him through his life and provided meaning for his life and had also controlled his destiny. Torches and lanterns gaily lit the courtyard as the carriage halted before the grand entry and masterful palace staircase. Horsemen and carriages were standing helter-skelter in the surrounding area as the footmen ushered the guests from their coaches. Peter explained it was customary during the long summer nights for the noble families to gather every Saturday for dancing and festivities that lasted into the wee hours of the morning. The elders perched about, jealously watching the boundless energy of the carefree spirited youth as they reminisced of their own former glory in younger days. Andrey found the hustle and bustle of the glamorous crowd tremendously stimulating and similar to a child's fascination while viewing an industrious anthill. After a period of observation, he concluded his rightful place was far away from the music, dancing, and noise, and the commotion, so he turned to meander into the depths of the hallways, decorated with magnificent works of art. He peered into the large drawing room filled with ornamental objects and rich mementos from around the world. Every available space was laden with vases, urns, clocks, and such. He spotted a Celtic drinking cup and a bronze nymph. Andrey did not enter the grotesque, overly elaborate room, but continued down the passage until it ended upon a vast wall of glass, enclosing a large botanical garden with a glass roof. These were called winter gardens because by controlling the temperature and humidity, boundless flowers and delicate plants could survive and provide magnificent blooms even during harsh winters. Opening the door, he felt the heavy fragrance of flowers magically lifting his spirits. As his eyes took in the beauty, he beheld a radiant female creature smiling intently upon him with amusement. He couldn't take his eyes from her angelic face and captivating smile. She floated towards him with a swish of her gown to greet him. "You must be here for the first time, because in my grandfather's home I know everyone by name, and I have never seen you before." Her eyes shone with astonishing brilliance, but the thing that captivated Andrey like nothing before were the intricate movements of her lips as she spoke. He froze and with downcast eyes mumbled that he was invited to the ball by a friend and that this was his first time in the city. After a moment, which seemed like eternity, Andrey pulled himself together and with more confidence in his voice began to introduce himself properly and to explain how he had recently arrived in Ukraine near Kiev and had at the last minute been invited to attend this ball by Peter Vorontsov. She liltingly laughed as she came closer with outstretched hands toward him. "My name is Ksenia Alexandrov, and Peter Petrovich is my friend from childhood. We enjoyed spending time together. He taught me to ride horseback. Our parents are very close, and ever since I can remember, he has been like an older brother to me." Andrey's heart was relieved to hear that their affection for each other was not romantic. Thanks be to God, thought Andrey, as he restrained himself from the instinctual genuflection. Ksenia Alexandrov began to tell Andrey about her childhood with Peter and with great enthusiasm. She seemed so caught up in her amusing memories of summer evenings, chasing the sun rays and butterflies, that Andrey felt he was a third-party observer of their joy. Andrey stood spellbound by her gentle gestures and the very subtle scent from her perfume. His pulse started racing. He became nervous inside, and he knew his face must be flushed in color. Suddenly, she became self-conscious, and her one-sided childish storytelling, she drew back and straightened her posture and smoothed her hair lightly. She spoke in a very different tone of voice, more dignified and aloof. "Forgive me, please, Mr. Barnslavsky. It seems as though I have gotten carried away by my childhood memories." "No, no, my lady, do not have a care, for your descriptions were wonderful for me, and your experiences were so different from those of my childhood. I could picture you and Peter frolicking about carefree in the countryside of those grand estates. You have quite a history and friendship together," mumbled Andrey as he glanced away briefly from her magnificent beauty. "Will you be so kind as to join me? Perhaps you will show these exquisite gardens to me," proposed Andrey. She nodded her head in agreement, and they slowly walked down the first aisle. The air surrounding her seemed to be packed with electrical power so completely that he thought at any moment thunder and lightning might begin. What was this power she had over him, he wondered. She walked silently, occasionally bending towards one rose bush or another to breathe in their fragrance, perhaps as a transfusion to her own body. Andrei's head began to spin from the smell of the flowers and her presence, and most important, the welling up of his emotions. He had never experienced such lightness and did not understand what was happening to him. This profound stirring of his spirit was new and unusual. He had never before been nervous in the presence of women, though truthfully, whenever possible, he avoided being in their company. A woman was capable of tempting a man to go in unfamiliar directions, like Delilah with Samson, or Eve with Adam, when they fell from God's grace into sin, leading to the curse and destruction. The Bible had many stories about complicated relationships, and up to this point, women had been rather easy for Andrey to ignore. For as long as he could remember, he had enjoyed learning the Holy Scriptures and Christian history. He was drawn to monks and their solitary life, away from people and distractions and noise. During his last year in seminary, he had been closely monitored by a spiritual leader in the discipline of internal prayer. Andrei's mind was swallowed up with the majesty and wisdom of God, especially when he read the Old Testament prophets. He was drawn to the simplicity of their life and their obedience to God's word. He had strongly considered becoming a monk, but an invisible hand seemed to hold him back, and a voice in his inner being told him that he would learn much more about God while in the world rather than being isolated from it. Could this burst of feeling toward this lovely woman be what I've been waiting for so long? Andrey contemplated. She may be the woman who has enjoyed a luxurious life and had many worldly experiences, but she seems so godly. His body began to slightly shiver, and he understood one thing. He needed to run as far away from her as he possibly could until he had time to consider this new flood of feelings pouring over him. "Honorable Ksenia Alexandrov, please forgive me for stealing so much of your time. No doubt you are being missed in the ball. It's probably time for me to go. I usually rise at the crack of dawn," he said. No, don't worry, Mr. Bronslavsky. I dance very rarely, and no one is expecting me to appear." "Why do you waken so early?" she said, drawing him into conversation. Suddenly, Andrey felt waves of comfort and trust. He took a relaxed breath and began to tell her about his life as if they were very familiar with one another. He told her about his years in seminary, how he loves prayer and the Holy Scriptures. He had an overpowering desire to talk to her and to pour out his soul to her. Andrey was very pleased that she not only listened to him, but she seemed to soak up every word he spoke. Occasionally, Ksenia would nod her head as if agreeing, and sometimes she would lift her eyebrows to let Andrey know that what he was explaining was somewhat new to her. Time flew by for both of them, so that they were both surprised when her grandmother came into the winter garden and chided Ksenia for separating herself from the people and the dancing. "Forgive me, Countess, I have been enjoying a fine conversation with Mr. Bronslavsky, and I've lost track of time." She turned towards Andrey and whispered, "Tomorrow at dawn by the pond." As quickly as a butterfly, she left him abruptly, retreating down the hall. Andrey stood stiffly, listening to indistinct thoughts screaming in his spinning head. He did not want to leave this enchanted winter garden where her presence was lingering. He wanted to breathe the fragrant air, breathe the air which she had breathed deep into himself. He was drawn to her essence more strongly than his desire to learn of the holy prophets or his desire to be a holy recluse. He was overwhelmed by the sound and smell and sight of her. "Oh, God, why am I just now meeting this sweet Ksenia? I'm already committed and dedicated to you. Is she an illusion? How could that be? At this moment, she is the only real thing in my existence. Oh, how could I ever live my life without her? Yet in just 3 months, I will be leaving for Russia, to the place you have led me to." In desperation, Andrei's soul cried out, and suddenly he heard a clear voice speaking to him deep inside. "My son, you are doubting me and my timing? I created her for you." Then Peter burst into the garden. Andrey, where have you been hiding all evening? I've been looking all over the palace for you. Thankfully, the Countess mentioned that she had met you here." "Peter, let's go home. This has been a very strange evening for me, and I need to tell you something incredible," blurted out Andrey as he stepped towards the door. "My friend, what has happened? You don't look like yourself," replied Peter. "All is well, but let's leave for your home now, and on the way I will tell you everything," Andrey answered.